All right, Boone, hit me. What is the first question of the week?
All right, who are going to be the surprise week winners in the fantasy semifinals? We know they happen all the time, right? We've talked about different league winners throughout the year and down the stretch, but now we're trying to figure out exactly who is going to help us advance here. And we have some guys, I think, this week that are kind of coming out of nowhere. Some of them are guys that have disappointed a little bit that I think are going to bounce back and potentially have good games. The first one that I want to mention is Jauan Jennings, and he's going up against the Colts here. This is a player who hasn't had huge monster performances, but he's been really excelling. The last 6 games, 6 touchdowns. That's fantastic. Again, the yardage hasn't been through the roof by any means, but he's coming off one of his best performances of the year here. He scored twice en route to the wide receiver 11 result. He was a name that I had brought up weeks ago, telling people that when they came back from bye, the 49ers were going to put up some points. And I think they're going to continue to do that here. And next up, they get the Colts defense. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points to receivers, including Harmon, a top 12 weekly finisher at the position in 4 of their last 5 games. And if you're wondering about that 5th game, it was Jackson Smith-Njigba. He finished as the wide receiver 14. So a top 14 fantasy wideout in 5 straight. Jennings right now with Ricky Pearsall banged up again, which is super unfortunate, but that makes Jennings the unquestioned number 1 receiver in this offense. So I think you're starting him as a wide receiver 2, and it would not shock me at all if he finishes as a top 12 receiver again this week.
Yeah, really frustrating. Obviously, that Ricky Pearsall is not going to play in this game, most likely. Did exactly what I was telling you last week. That he was gonna bounce back coming out of the bye. He had that game against the Titans. It was the perfect matchup for him. This would have been a good one as well. But yeah, now all of that goodness gets to go to Jauan Jennings, who in his own right is a darn good football player. I think can make good on this matchup. So I by the way, he's a guy who's playing for incentives in his contract this season and obviously is still playing for a big contract next season. So sometimes I think some of the fantasy bros out there go a little too hard on the contract incentive. I don't know what your opinion on this, but go a little too hard on the contract incentive stuff at the end of the season. It's fun to note in week 18 when fantasy's over and maybe you're doing some DFS prop bets, whatever. But I do think for Jennings definitely is still motivated to play for the contract going into this upcoming offseason where he will be one of the best free agents on the market.
Yeah, it's another one of those data points to consider, right? You don't want to make that the only thing that you're basing a ranking or a lineup decision on, but it's another factor, helps with tiebreakers and maybe boosts a guy up a spot or 2 in the rankings when they have something on the line like that. It's definitely something that you have to consider, though. And it's great now that people are really all over it. So I don't have to go do that research myself. We can just let everybody else do it and throw it out there. And we can pick it up along the way, because in years past, I used to go through it all myself, which I'm glad I don't have to do anymore, Harmon. But I want to go back and forth here. I want to hear some of yours. Okay. So who do you have as a potential, week winner that's going to get people into the fantasy playoffs, into the fantasy championship week next week?
I've got CJ Stroud going against the Las Vegas Raiders. Number 1, it's a good matchup. The Raiders stink. And I also think that this Texans offense is kind of quietly coming together, man. He's played really well. I think CJ Stroud has, coming off that injury. He had the one kind of interception in his first game back. Other than that, I think he's played really good football. I love when the projections change on the screen as we're talking. Don't doubt me, Yahoo Fantasy projections. Come on, I'm making a good case here for CJ Stroud. I think the offensive line has played better in front of him. I think the run game has been really a big benefactor of that as well. We'll see about Woody Marks' status in this game, but regardless, going against this Texans team, I think they'll be able to protect. I think they'll be able to block it up. And then we're looking at a group of receivers who I think Nico Collins is playing at an elite level right now. He can get the football. They rotate basically everybody else. I just love the way Stroud is playing right now. It's a good matchup. So, he's definitely somebody that if you are, kind of waffling with your starting quarterback, I think he's a fringe top 10, certainly top 12 performer on the week to see in week 16.
Yeah, and if you're trying to find that guy to potentially be that streamer, to be that low-end QB1 to get into your lineup, if you look at a matchup where the team is favored by a couple touchdowns, that means there's probably going to be a decent amount of points scored in that game. And guess what? The quarterback is often involved in that scoring. So I think there is a great shot that he is going to at least be a part of a couple touchdowns in this game, if not more. And you mentioned it. We'll talk about Woody Marks and this backfield a little bit later, but there's injuries across the board. It's not just Woody Marks, it's Nick Chubb. We're trying to figure out who is going to be in that backfield for this game. That might be another reason why they just throw a little bit more. And they have so much talent, right? Like the receiving core, we're finally seeing, a guy like Jaden Higgins get a little more involved. I know he had a down game last week, but prior to that, he had at least 5 targets in 5 straight games. So it was great to see him getting more involved. I think in this matchup, it's a spot where you could give him some run, maybe let him spread his wings and do a little something. And then a guy like Dalton Schultz, who I'm not normally a fan of, not somebody that I normally want to have in my lineup, but he's been playing great this year. So they have a lot of weapons, and this team is kind of putting it together at the right time, which makes them scary in real life, thinking about the playoffs as a Bills fan here, but also, pretty enticing for fantasy down the stretch.
Yeah, good shout on Dalton Schultz. I talked about it with Ray earlier this week as well, and he's just been a good part of their just check down package, which is, again, get that ball out of CJ Stroud's hands. Stroud has made good decisions. He's kept the offense moving. I've said it a lot this week. I picked up CJ Stroud in my team that survived with Justin Herbert last week, and those are 2 guys I think all the way up till Sunday I'm going to be weighing, like, do I stick with Herbert in a great matchup but with so many ecosystem concerns there, or do I go with CJ Stroud? So I have certainly been kicking that decision around in my head. Probably will do that all till Sunday. Let's get one of your surprising week winners here for week 16.
So I will say this guy's going to be a common thread in the first 3 questions in this segment. I did not realize that when I was putting it together. And perhaps it's because he is on my mind because I'm trying to figure out where should I be playing him? Which running back should I be playing him over? The guy I'm talking about is Michael Carter, and he's going against the Falcons this week. I brought him up on the waiver wire show on Monday. I thought he was the top ad, somebody that people should be going out aggressively to get. And this is the reason why I don't think we should stress about fantasy football, because you look at this backfield and it's like, who would have predicted before the season James Conner goes down, Trey Benson goes down. Now Bam Knight is going to be out for the next couple of weeks here. Amari Demercado dealt with an injury. He came back last week but didn't play very much. We'll see if he gets more work this week. And that just leaves us all for Michael Carter to potentially be that real surprise late season league winner type. Last week, 80% of the snaps, 94 scrimmage yards, 4 receptions, had 18 total touches. And that was against the Texans defense, who we know is like the scariest unit out there at the moment. Now he gets the Falcons. They're a positive matchup for fantasy running backs. And if he holds down this lead back job, which I think he is going to, and if your team gets a win this week, then he gets the Bengals in week 17. And we have eyed these matchups up for a while with every single back. We were talking about Trey Benson before he didn't return, right? Oh, he's going to get these great matchups in the fantasy playoffs. All right, he's not coming back. It's going to be Bam Knight. No, well, now we're jumping on Michael Carter. Hopefully that's not a curse, and hopefully he's not going to get hurt this week, and they're going to have to go to somebody else here. But I think he does have this thing on lockdown going into this game. I'm very excited about potentially playing him. It just depends on what your options are here. Demercado's explosive. He had some big plays earlier in the season, but like I mentioned, he got hurt, and I think the coaching staff still holds something against him for that fumble at the goal line. I feel like they don't look at him the same since that happened, the way they talked about him in the media and stuff. So I think they're going to give Carter his shot, and he has 2 games this year where he's gotten at least 15 touches, Harmon. The first was obviously the one I just mentioned last week, which was a great fantasy outing. The other one was against an easier opponent in the Titans earlier in the season, in week 5. He had 23 touches. He turned that into 73 yards and a score. And I think that is definitely possible here. I think we could see him get 70, 75 plus scrimmage yards and find the end zone. He's going to be the guy around the goal line in this one. I really like him. I might even move him up higher. Right now, I have him as like a high-end RB3. I want to push him up into that low-end RB2 range because I do think he is going to have a great game this week.
Any like names you'd throw out that you'd kind of give the people like this is a bucket of players that maybe he would be around if you moved him up, just so kind of people can make some of those start-sit decisions?
Yeah, like when you're thinking about, I need to pull my rankings up to do it properly, but when you're thinking about guys like, Aaron Jones and, Tanner Tracy Jr. and the guys in that range, right? Like right now I'm looking at, and I always, spoil the fact that we're recording this before the Thursday night game. And again, hopefully I'm not putting any primetime curses on anyone, but Kenneth Walker is someone that I have on a bunch of teams that we've talked about all season long. And right now I'm looking at playing Carter over Kenneth Walker this week. And some people will be listening to this on Friday and they will either think that I'm a genius or a fool, one way or the other. But regardless, I don't know how you could trust Kenneth Walker with what he's done recently and against a very difficult opponent. And I actually think that Carter has more upside in this matchup, which is something I did not think I would be saying even a few weeks ago, Harmon, but here we are.
Here we are. What a wild world that we live in. Okay, I'll get to one of mine here. This is at the tight end position. You went running backs, wide receivers. I went with quarterback, tight end. So for me, it's Colston Loveland. And maybe this won't be that surprising at this point because now Luther Burden and Rome Odunze are not going to play on Saturday's game. But man, Colston Loveland, I'm going to push him up into definitely top 10 territory at tight end, maybe closer to top 5. I just really like the way he projects. So a couple stats here on these Bears pass catchers. When Rome Odunze is not on the field, this is the yards per route run for the players on the Bears offense. Olamide Zaccheaus actually has the most routes when Rome Odunze is not on the field, 0.3 yards per route. Nothing burger. DJ Moore, 1.12. Nothing burger. Luther Burden, 4.13, obviously, but then Cole Kmet, 1.96. Okay. Colston Loveland, 2.4. Very good. Obviously, the most there outside of Luther Burden. We take Luther Burden off the field here, and then everything. Again, this is a small sample. We're talking about like 34 to 20-ish routes on the season. No Rome Odunze, no Luther Burden. But yards per out run goes 1.6 DJ Moore, 2.94 Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet 3.57. So I think actually Cole Kmet is more of a desperation play, but it's like the tight ends that have really thrived when both of those wide receivers are not on the field. Olamide Zaccheaus once again, by the way, 0.46. So I think you're getting too cute if it's like, oh, Zaccheaus or one of these guys is getting a big bump. Even DJ Moore, it's not like the big bump is going to him. I think the bump goes to the tight ends. I think they run out in a ton of 12 personnel, a lot of heavy packages. I think they're going to try to run the ball 40 times like they did against the Eagles. We'll see if that works as efficiently as it did against the Eagles. However, I think a big part of that will be the tight ends are on the field. They get into some of that play action. I think Colston Loveland has a big game on Saturday evening.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to sell me on Colston Loveland. I feel like I've been trying to sell everyone else on him all year long. It's unfortunate that the way that he's potentially going to get there is because of injuries, whether it was earlier in the season when Cole Kmet got hurt or now watching these two receivers get ruled out for this game. But yeah, I got to bump him up. I had him as the tight end 13 before this. We got the news today. I haven't had a chance to do a rankings update this afternoon when that news came out. So I am definitely putting him into the top 10. And I agree with you. He is going to be very close to that top 5. You just see, and we're going to talk about a little later in the show about kind of the state of tight end this week, but there are a lot of guys that are in like a similar bucket when you go from tight end 3 or so all the way down to like tight end 15 or 16. You could kind of shuffle those guys up and deal them out however you want. And now because of this news, you got to move somebody like Loveland up, and I'd be playing him over kind of some surprising names like Travis Kelce. But again, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show, so we'll get there. I love that call, though, Harmon. I think that he's somebody that could certainly step up and be a week winner here. I also think DK Metcalf is that kind of guy. And at any given week, like DK Metcalf can go off. We know that. This week, he's going against the Lions. This is the highest projected point total of the week, 52.5 at the moment. Should be plenty of points in the dome here. You don't have to worry about the weather, which is also nice because there will be some games. Doesn't seem to be a crazy week for weather right now, but there's always games this time of year where that comes into play. These guys are going to be in the dome. It's going to be points galore. And Metcalf has had some success on the road there in Detroit. Like, he's played there 3 years in a row. He had 104 yards, 75 yards, and 149 yards in those 3 games. So I'm feeling pretty good. I know those games weren't with the Steelers, but still, this is the kind of game where I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have to open it up, or they're going to have to throw the ball a bunch, and they're going to have to get Metcalf going if they want to have any chance of winning this one. You could also go back. I mean, the fourth time that he played, it was back in 2021, but he had 3 touchdowns in that game. Totally different Lions team, but still, I wanted to mention that because I'm looking at it right now. So yeah, the Lions are banged up in their secondary, banged up on defense. I think that helps him. And he's been producing lately too, right? 7 for 148 a couple weeks ago, had 12 targets in that game last week, 55 yards and a touchdown. So maybe not completely out of nowhere because he's put up some decent stats in the last couple of weeks, but I think this is going to be one of those boom weeks for him. One of those big Metcalf performances and the kind of game that's going to get people into the fantasy championship. So right now for me, a wide receiver 2, but slowly moving up my rankings close to that wide receiver 1 range.
Yeah, we can basically tag team that one, man, because he's actually going to be my bold prediction of the week. I've already written it up, so I was happy to see you had him on the outline here because I was going to throw him out as well for this segment. Makes complete sense. The only notes I would add there is that regardless of the Lions' injuries, they still just play a bunch of man coverage and they play a ton of single high, and those just looks funnel to the X receiver. DK Metcalf obviously is the X receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, so I'm with you. I'm expecting like a big game from DK Metcalf here. 60 plus yards, at least 1 touchdown. I'm looking for a big performance here from Metcalf in that kind of Looney Tunes Steelers offense.